The fluorescent lights in Gavin's office were buzzing the way they always did when the building's electrical system was under strain. He sat across from me with his legs crossed, scrolling through something on his tablet while my performance binder sat unopened between us. 6 years of documented results, client testimonials, and system architecture blueprints that I'd spent 2 weeks compiling, and this man hadn't even cracked the cover. "I appreciate you putting this together, Edward," Gavin said without looking up. "But we've decided to go in a different direction for the infrastructure director role. Logan will be stepping into the position starting next quarter. We think his fresh perspective and modern cloud-first approach is what the department needs going forward." Logan, 27 years old, had been at Pinnacle Group for 11 months. He could not tell you the difference between a load balancer and a lunch break if his quarterly bonus depended on it. But he had a prestigious computer science degree, a wardrobe that looked like a tech startup catalog, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having been responsible for anything that actually mattered. I kept my expression steady. 18 years in the Army teaches you that. When you have sat across from a commanding officer telling you your squad is being redeployed for a third rotation, some vice president in a slim-fit blazer does not exactly rattle your composure. "Understood," I said. "I appreciate you letting me know." Gavin finally looked up, clearly relieved I was not making a scene. "Great. Glad we are aligned. Oh, and the Alliance Bank migration is still on track for this weekend, right? Their technology director has been calling me directly, which is a little uncomfortable. I need you to make sure that goes flawlessly." I picked up my binder and walked out. My name is Edward. I am 55 years old, and for 6 years I was the person who kept Pinnacle Group's entire technology infrastructure from collapsing. Not the person who presented at board meetings, not the person whose name appeared on press releases when we landed new clients. I was the one who answered the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning when servers crashed, who rebuilt our disaster recovery systems from scratch after the previous director quit mid-contract, and who personally maintained relationships with every major banking client that trusted us with their data. I came to Pinnacle after my Army career ended, and my marriage ended with it. My wife could not take another deployment, another missed anniversary, another phone call at midnight pulling me away from our daughter's life. The divorce was clean, but it gutted me. Chloe was 12 when I signed the papers, and the look on her face when I explained that Dad was going to have a different house now still wakes me up some nights. I needed stability, regular hours, good health insurance, a paycheck that could cover child support and still let me save for Chloe's future. The Army had trained me as a signals intelligence specialist, which, in civilian terms, meant I understood networks, encryption, and infrastructure at a level most technology people never reach. When you are responsible for communication systems in a combat zone, you learn that redundancy is not optional and downtime can cost lives. Different stakes in corporate America? Sure, but the discipline transfers. Pinnacle was a disaster when I started. Their previous director had been running the infrastructure like a personal domain. No documentation, no standardized procedures, passwords stored in a spreadsheet on his desktop that nobody else could access. When he left, he took every piece of institutional knowledge with him, and the company was hemorrhaging clients because systems kept failing. I spent my first 8 months working 16-hour days. I rebuilt the entire network architecture from the ground up, documented every single process, created runbooks for every scenario, established monitoring systems that could predict failures before they happened, and wrote a 400-page technical operations manual that covered everything from routine maintenance to catastrophic failure recovery. It had color-coded tabs, cross-referenced indices, the whole thing organized the way we did field manuals in the Army, because when things go wrong at 3 o'clock in the morning, you need to find answers fast. The Alliance Bank account was our crown jewel, a $22 million annual contract to manage their entire digital banking infrastructure. I had built that relationship personally, spending weekends at their data center troubleshooting integration issues their own engineers could not solve. Their technology director, a sharp woman named Diana, specifically requested me for every technical discussion, Edward speaks our language, she told Gavin once during a quarterly review. He does not just understand systems, he understands banking compliance. Gavin's father, the chief executive officer named Donald, barely understood what our infrastructure team did. Why would he, when everything ran like clockwork under my watch? Gavin attended maybe 4 client meetings total in 6 years, always showing up at the end to shake hands and claim credit during annual reviews. He was the face of the department, while I was the silent foundation that kept everything running smoothly. I had accepted this dynamic for a long time, believing that hard work would eventually speak for itself. It was a costly mistake, but it was one I was about to correct. Every morning, I used to be logged into our monitoring systems by 6 o'clock in the morning, 2 hours before my shift technically started. I would review overnight alerts, check backup completion logs, and verify that all client-facing systems were performing within acceptable parameters. My old platoon sergeant used to say that the enemy attacks when you are sleeping, and he was right. A memory leak building overnight, a backup failing silently, a security certificate about to expire. You catch these things early, or you explain to angry bank executives why their customers cannot access their accounts. Every evening, I sent Gavin detailed status reports covering system health, pending maintenance windows, and potential risks on the horizon. Between those reports, I was the person everyone called when something broke. Timothy, our senior network engineer, used to joke that my desk was the only place in the building where problems actually got solved, instead of just escalated to another meeting. But that was before the rejection. Chloe was 20 now, a junior at college studying biomedical engineering. She was a brilliant kid, the kind of student who made the dean's list while working part-time at a research lab. She had inherited her mother's determination and, for better or worse, my stubbornness. But graduate school was expensive, and she had already taken on more student loans than I felt comfortable managing. The promotion to infrastructure director would have meant a $40,000 raise plus equity. It would have been enough to help Chloe finish her degree, debt-free, and maybe start a proper savings account for the first time in my life. That promotion was supposed to change everything. The night after Gavin's rejection, I sat in my apartment staring at the ceiling. Chloe had texted me a photo of her latest lab results, something about protein folding analysis with a string of excited emojis. I stared at that text for 20 minutes, thinking about the fact that my daughter was building a future while her father was apparently not qualified to manage the systems he had been running for 6 years. I made a decision before I fell asleep. Not an angry decision, a calculated one. I logged into the monitoring system at exactly 8 o'clock the next morning. Not 6 o'clock, not 7:15, but 8 o'clock sharp. For the first time in 6 years, I did not review the overnight alerts before the rest of the team arrived, did not check the backup logs, and did not verify client system performance. I opened my email, responded only to messages directly addressed to me, and began working on my assigned responsibilities, specifically the system and organization, Control 2 compliance audit documentation. That was technically my primary job function. When our monitoring dashboard started flashing amber alerts for the Alliance Bank staging environment, around 9:30 in the morning, I noted the alert, created a service ticket in our tracking system, and assigned it to the appropriate on-call engineer. Standard procedure, exactly as written in the operations manual that nobody besides me had ever opened. By 10:15, Timothy appeared at my desk looking confused. "Hey, Edward. The Alliance staging environment is throwing memory errors. Same issue we had last quarter, the one where you reconfigured the heap allocation. You want to jump on that?" I looked up from the compliance spreadsheet I was updating. "I submitted a ticket. It should be in the queue." Timothy stared at me. "Staging is throwing errors. We need to look at this directly. Diana's team has a load test scheduled for tomorrow, and if staging is down, they will have to postpone." "The ticket is in the system," I repeated. "The on-call engineer should be able to reference the runbook. Section 12 covers memory management for the banking platform." Timothy stood there for a few seconds waiting for me to add something. 12 years we had worked together. He had started as a junior technician right around the same time I did, and worked his way up to senior engineer. He was a good man, the kind of colleague who would swap shifts with you when personal stuff came up. He knew me well enough to know something was off. "Everything okay, man?" "Just focusing on my core responsibilities," I said with a small smile. He walked away slowly, glancing back twice. The ticket sat in the queue for 3 hours before Owen from the Tier 2 team picked it up. Owen was a decent engineer for routine tasks, but the Alliance platform had custom configurations that I had built specifically for their compliance requirements. He spent 45 minutes staring at the logs before coming to my desk. "Edward, I cannot figure out this memory allocation issue. The configuration does not match anything in our standard documentation. Can you walk me through it?" "I would be happy to help, but I am working on the System and Organization Control 2 compliance audit documentation that is due to the financial regulators by Friday. Have you checked the operations manual? Section 12, subsection C, covers the Alliance-specific memory configurations." Owen's eyes went wide. "That manual is like 400 pages long. It is well indexed," I assured him. "There are screenshots and step-by-step instructions for every scenario. I wrote it specifically so anyone on the team could handle these situations independently." The staging environment stayed broken all day. At exactly 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I saved my work, shut down my laptop, and left. On the drive home, I called Chloe. Chloe picked up on the second ring, which was unusual since she was typically buried in coursework this hour. "Dad, is everything okay? You never call on a Tuesday." "Just wanted to hear your voice," I said. "How is the lab going?" She launched into a 10-minute explanation of her research project that I only half understood, but completely loved hearing. It was something about using machine learning to predict protein structures for drug development. The excitement in her voice reminded me of her mother when she used to talk about her teaching. Before the deployments wore that excitement away. "Dad, you sound different," Chloe said when she finally paused for breath. "Did something happen at work?" I thought about how to explain workplace politics to a 20-year-old who still believed the world rewarded hard work. "Just realized my time is worth more than I have been charging for it." She laughed. "About time, old man." When I checked my work phone after we hung up, there were 67 missed calls and 41 unread messages. Diana's team at Alliance Bank had discovered the staging environment was still down and had escalated directly to Gavin. Gavin had tried to escalate to Logan, our shiny new infrastructure director, who had responded with a suggestion to reboot the servers. Rebooting the Alliance banking platform without following the proper shutdown sequence would have corrupted 3 days' worth of transaction logs and triggered an automatic regulatory audit. Timothy had caught the order just in time and refused to execute it. I set the phone on my kitchen counter and made myself dinner for the first time in months instead of eating takeout at my desk. By Wednesday morning, the situation had escalated significantly. I arrived at precisely 8 o'clock in the morning to find the office in visible disarray. Logan was standing in the server room doorway with his laptop, looking like a college student who had wandered into the wrong exam. 3 engineers were arguing about the Alliance memory configuration, while a fourth was on the phone with what sounded like an increasingly irritated client. The staging environment was still down. Diana's team had postponed their load test, which meant the production migration, scheduled for Saturday, was now in jeopardy. A $22 million annual contract was hanging by a thread because nobody had read Section 12C of a manual I had written 4 years ago. I settled at my desk and opened the System and Organization Control 2 audit files. Gavin appeared at my workstation at 9:30 in the morning, looking like he had not slept. His usual polished appearance was cracked, tie crooked, shirt wrinkled, in a way that suggested he had changed in his office. "Edward, we need to talk about the Alliance situation." "Of course, how can I assist you?" "Diana called me directly at 11 o'clock last night. She is threatening to invoke the contract service level penalties if staging is not operational by the end of business today. That is a $350,000 penalty per incident. Do you understand what that means?" I nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds serious. Has Logan been able to diagnose the issue? He is the infrastructure director now. This would fall under his department." Gavin's jaw tightened. "Logan is still getting up to speed on the Alliance systems. You know how complex they are. I do, I agreed. That is why I wrote a 400-page manual documenting every component, every configuration, and every troubleshooting procedure. It is on the shared drive. I referenced it during last quarter's department meeting. Gavin stared at me for a long moment. I need you to fix this now. I turned my monitor so he could see the compliance spreadsheet. I would, but the compliance documentation is due to the financial regulators by Friday. Missing that deadline could trigger a formal review of our entire security posture, which would affect every client, not just Alliance. It would be a serious compliance failure. You could see the moment it clicked in his mind. The realization that I had always been juggling these competing priorities silently, making sure nothing ever fell through the cracks so that men like Gavin and Logan could sleep soundly while taking credit for the smooth operation they had no hand in running. Can you not do both? Not without working outside my contracted hours, I said evenly. And I have decided to maintain a better work-life balance. My daughter has been telling me I work too much, and she is right. Gavin's hands were actually shaking. He turned and walked away without another word. That evening, I drove to Chloe's campus. She was not expecting me, so the surprise on her face when she opened her dorm room door was worth the 2-hour drive. "Dad, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" I held up a bag from her favorite Thai restaurant. "Thought you might want dinner with your old man." We sat on the floor of her tiny dorm room eating food and talking about everything. We discussed her research, her roommate drama, and a boy in her organic chemistry class who kept asking her to study together. She showed me the lab where she worked, the whiteboard covered in molecular diagrams I could not decipher, and the microscope she had named Gerald for reasons she could not explain. Spending time with her made me realize how much of her life I had missed while working late at my desk. On the drive home, my phone kept buzzing in my pocket, but I ignored it. I was no longer on their clock. Thursday morning, I walked in at 8 o'clock in the morning to a building that felt like a hospital during a major crisis. People were moving quickly, talking in hushed voices, and carrying laptops between conference rooms. Through the glass walls of conference room A, I could see Gavin's father, Donald, alongside Gavin, Logan, and on the large monitor, Diana's unmistakable face. I sat at my desk and opened the compliance files. It took 12 minutes for Gavin's assistant to appear. "Edward, emergency meeting now." I gathered a notebook and walked calmly to the conference room. When I entered, 5 faces turned toward me with varying degrees of desperation. Donald spoke first. He was 63 years old, built like a former athlete with silver hair, and the kind of commanding presence that made you understand how he had built a financial services company from nothing. Right now, he looked completely exhausted. "Edward, thank goodness you are here. We need your help." I sat down and placed my notebook on the table. "Of course, sir. What is going on?" Diana's voice came through the speakers, precise and controlled the way banking executives are when they are furious. "Mr. Edward, our staging environment has been down for 3 days. My team cannot perform the load testing required for Saturday's production migration. If this migration does not happen on schedule, we will miss our regulatory filing window, which exposes both Alliance and Pinnacle to severe federal penalties. I need to know if you can resolve this today." I nodded. "Can you describe the specific failure mode your team is seeing?" She outlined the symptoms: authentication failures, memory allocation errors, and cascading timeout issues across the staging cluster. I recognized the pattern immediately because I had designed the system. That is a cascading authentication failure triggered by mismatched memory allocation parameters, I said. The custom Alliance configuration uses a non-standard heap size to accommodate your compliance logging requirements. Someone appears to have applied a standard template over the custom settings, which broke the authentication handshake with your compliance monitoring layer. Logan shifted uncomfortably. I was following best practices. The standard template should have worked. I turned to him, not with anger, but with the patient tone I used when training new recruits in the military. The standard template works for standard configurations. Alliance's platform was purpose-built for their specific regulatory requirements. The custom parameters are documented in the Operations Manual, Section 12C, pages 287 through 315. There was a silence that reminded me of the moment in a briefing room when everyone realizes the mission plan has a fatal flaw. Gavin leaned forward. "Edward, what will it take to fix this today?" I looked around the table. Donald's face was a mask of controlled anxiety. Gavin looked like a man watching his career flash before his eyes. Logan was staring at his hands. On the screen, Diana waited with the calm patience of someone who holds a $22 million contract and knows exactly how much leverage that she possessed. "I can have staging operational within 2 hours," I said, "and I can personally oversee the production migration Saturday to ensure it goes smoothly. But I should mention something first." The room went still. "I have received an offer from Sentinel Tech, Senior Vice President of Infrastructure. They are very interested in my experience with secure financial systems." Donald's eyes narrowed. "You are leaving us?" "I have not accepted yet," I replied. "I wanted to evaluate all my options before making a decision." Diana spoke from the screen. "Mr. Donald, Edward is the reason we have maintained our contract with Pinnacle. If your organization cannot retain him, we will need to reassess whether Pinnacle is the right partner for our infrastructure needs." That was the kill shot. Alliance was not just $22 million a year, they were our reference client. Lose Alliance, and the dominoes would fall. Donald stood up. "Edward, let us talk privately in my office. Gavin, handle the immediate technical issues with Logan's support. Diana, we will have your staging environment operational within 2 hours. You have my personal guarantee." I followed Donald to his office on the top floor. He closed the door and sat down heavily behind his desk. "I am going to be direct with you, Edward. I clearly have not been paying close enough attention to how this department operates." "Tell me what happened, so," I told him. I laid it out the way I deliver a mission brief. 6 years of arriving early, staying late, maintaining every system, and building every client relationship. Then, I revealed the critical issue Donald had not been told. I had discovered that Gavin and Logan were planning a mass layoff of our 12 senior engineers to outsource the department to an offshore firm owned by Gavin's cousin. "Donald, their plan violates the Federal Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act," I explained, referencing 29 U.S.C., Section 2101. Under the Warning Act, you cannot implement a mass layoff without 60 days advance written notice. Doing so exposes Pinnacle to class action lawsuits, liability for back pay and benefits for every employee, and civil penalties of $500 per day of violation. Donald's eyes widened in shock, I continued. "Furthermore, by attempting to steer this outsourcing contract to a family member's firm while placing our largest client at risk, Gavin is in direct breach of his fiduciary duty of loyalty and care to Pinnacle Group. If this outsourcing proceeds, the board and the shareholders will have clear grounds for a lawsuit against him and the company for wasting corporate assets." Donald listened without interrupting. The silence in the room grew heavier with every word I spoke, and when I finished, he rubbed his forehead in frustration. As a veteran business owner, he knew exactly what a federal violation of the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act and a breach of fiduciary duty meant for Pinnacle. He looked at me with respect for my vigilance. "I had no idea Gavin was planning this outsourcing scheme," Donald said quietly. "He told me he was saving costs, but never mentioned the family connection or the lack of proper notice. I will not tolerate illegal shortcuts. Gavin will be demoted immediately to a non-operational role, and Logan will be stripped of the director title. I am creating a new position, Chief Technology Officer, reporting directly to me. I want you in that seat, Edward. I am offering a base salary of $185,000 plus performance bonuses, and I will match Sentinel Tech's equity offer." That number hit me hard. It was more than double my current salary, enough to pay off Chloe's student loans in graduate school, but I did not answer immediately. That is generous, but compensation is not the only issue. The people who build and maintain the systems that make everything else possible deserve clear career paths. I want to establish a technical leadership track for 12 engineers so they do not get stuck at the same level for a decade. Otherwise, we are just telling them that the only way to get ahead is to threaten to leave. Donald studied me, then nodded. "Fair point. Draft a proposal and I will review it." "What about Logan?" "Logan stays," I said. He is not experienced enough, but he is not incompetent. Move him to a senior architect role under my supervision. Give him 2 years to learn the infrastructure properly. In the military, we succeeded by putting the right people in the right positions and training them, not by tearing them down. Donald extended his hand. Fix the alliance situation today. Take the weekend to think about the offer, and Monday morning, I want your answer. I went back downstairs and spent 2 hours restoring the alliance staging environment. The actual technical fix took 40 minutes. The rest of the time I spent documenting what went wrong, creating a quick reference guide, and walking Timothy through the process so he could handle similar issues independently. Saturday morning, Timothy was already online when I logged in. Everything is green, he typed. Your documentation is incredibly good. The migration went flawlessly. Diana sent an email to Donald personally commending the work, completely ignoring Gavin and Logan. Sunday morning, Chloe called while I was sitting on my balcony drinking coffee, watching the sunrise in a way I hadn't done in years. Dad, you sound relaxed, she said. Mom told me you got passed over, and I am sorry. Do not be. It turned into something much better. She paused. You know what I remember most about when you were deployed? You would always ask about my day first, my friends, my soccer games. You always gave me your attention. I felt my throat tighten. Your mother taught me that. She said the best thing a parent can give is their attention. Well, she was right, and lately, you have been giving more of it. Whatever changed at work, keep doing it. Monday morning, I arrived at 7 o'clock and accepted Donald's offer. 4 months later, the transformation was tangible. I had promoted Timothy to principal engineer and established the technical leadership track. Logan was thriving in his new architect role. Freed from pretending to understand systems he had never learned, he turned out to have a genuine talent for system design under my mentoring. The alliance contract expanded by $8 million annually, and Diana told Donald the expansion was solely based on her confidence in my technical leadership. 6 months after that Monday morning, I left the office early on a Friday. Chloe was graduating the following week, a semester early. I had cleared my schedule for the entire week, the first real vacation I had taken in 6 years. My phone buzzed in my car. It was a text from Chloe. Dad, the protein model works. Also, I found an apartment near the graduate school. It is affordable if someone were willing to help with the deposit. I smiled and typed back. Send me the details and congratulations, sweetheart. Your mother and I are proud of you. Her reply came immediately. Thanks, Dad, for showing up. I sat in my car for a minute. The old Edward arrived before dawn and left after dark, solving every crisis without demanding recognition. That man thought loyalty meant sacrifice. It does not. Being indispensable just means they will use you until you break. The moment I stopped being invisible and started being unavailable, they finally saw what they had taken for granted. When I stopped giving every hour to a company that did not value my time, I got those hours back, and I spent them on the person who actually deserved them. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop and let the silence speak.